I want to intro this before I just read it. That may happen occasionally. This is really a follow-up from last week in a way. Once again, the Revised Common Lectionary gives a collection of readings, and I always like focusing on something. And last week we talked a little bit about Jeremiah buying a field right as Jerusalem was being attacked by the Babylonians, right? They hadn't yet taken the city, and there's all this buildup for what's about to come. Well, this week, the reading option was from Lamentations, which is the book after Jeremiah. It's a collection of poems of a sort, written by Jeremiah about the fall of Jerusalem. So temporally in the story, this kind of follows shortly after last week. And I thought it would be nice to kind of move in that direction. Also, I've once again extended the reading a little bit because it gave like 3 little chunks all over the place, and that didn't make any sense to me. So I just picked one of those chunks and made it a little longer so you actually kind of get a feel for this a bit. So, this is our reading from Lamentations, chapter 3. I'm going to do 1 through 24. I am one who has seen affliction under the rod of God's wrath. He has driven and brought me into darkness without any light. Against me alone he turns his hand again and again all day long. He has made my flesh and my skin waste away, and broken my bones. He has besieged and enveloped me with bitterness and tribulation. He has made me sit in darkness like the dead of long ago. He has walled me about so I cannot escape. He has put heavy chains on me. Though I call and cry for help, he shuts out my prayer. He has blocked my ways with hewn stones. He has made my paths crooked. He is a bear lying in wait for me, a lion in hiding. He led me off my way and tore me to pieces. He has made me desolate. He bent his bow and set me as a mark for his arrow. He shot into my vitals, the arrow of his quiver. I have become the laughingstock of all my people, the object of their taunt songs all day long. He has filled me with bitterness. He has sated me with wormwood. He has made my teeth grind on gravel and made me cower in ashes. My soul is bereft of peace. I have forgotten what happiness is. So I say, gone is my glory, and all that I had hoped for from the Lord. The thought of my affliction and my homelessness is wormwood and gall. My soul continually thinks of it, and is bowed down within me. But this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, says my soul. Therefore, I will hope in him. We don't get a lot of those kind of readings, do we? No. The lectionary actually skips some of these, which I think is fun. This is a category of writing that does appear repeatedly in the Psalms and throughout Scripture called lamentation. And it's something that has been unfortunately overwhelmingly sort of lost over the centuries. It just isn't addressed a whole lot anymore because it's kind of a downer, right? We're really good at the Easter morning kind of stuff, the happy celebration, but unfortunately there's also a Good Friday. There's a crucifixion before you get to Easter. And there are a lot of reminders of that in here. Part of me was maybe excited is the wrong word to ever use for something like this, but interested because, random note, the first Sunday I was preaching here, I came up and we moved it because we're having communion, but there's a Bible that's open up on the altar most of the time. I'm always interested in what different churches have it open to, because there's two strategies. There's one where part of the setup in the mornings is someone changes the page to something specific related to the day. I have found exactly one church ever that does that. The more common strategy is someone flips it open somewhere in the middle, usually Psalms, and we leave it there because no one can see to read from it anyways. If we're reading, we do it from here so we're facing people so everyone can hear. And what I thought was beautiful was that the Bible up here is open to Psalm 137, which is one of the very few psalms that gets skipped in almost every psalter. If you look like in the hymnals here, there's a chunk. You don't have to, just if you wanted to. There's a chunk where it goes through the various psalms and kind of puts them as responsive readings or to be sung. And it'll either not have 137, or I guarantee it only has the first half of it, because the second chunk of Psalm 137 is the Israelites in Babylon really angry about having been taken, which is very understandable. And so the second half of Psalm 137, if you ever, or the second chunk, the end chunk, if you're curious, is in fact the people saying, let me just do the last two verses. O daughter Babylon, you devastator, happy shall they be who pay you back for what you have done to us. Happy shall they be who take your little ones and smash them against the rocks. Yeah, I thought that was interesting, that's what was open up here when I came up here the first time. I'm like, whoa, this is going to be exciting. There's other psalms on that page. I don't think that was the intent. But then we have, just so happened that the lectionary readings are Jeremiah and Lamentations, and I'm like, oh, this lines up really nicely. There's a lot of unhappy stuff in here, because unfortunately there's a lot of unhappy stuff out here, right? Like, that is not new information to anyone. But for whatever reason, it does seem that we struggle with that more than anything. I, myself, a few years back, my son was 2. He had just turned 2, and he was diagnosed with leukemia, which was not a happy day, and that made things complicated. But I'm always interested when people get really bad news. You deal with chronic illnesses or major stuff like this, loss of loved ones. The things that people say trying to help, more often than not, aren't about sitting with our pain and helping us experiencing it. There's the things people say, well-intentioned, all around, are often a push to not feel that way, right? We have all experienced that, I'm sure. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the idea of, you got to have some rain for the things to grow, so we need to accept the rain. I get that, but man, there are moments when that's not what you need to hear. And in those moments, the Bible, at least, has no problem yelling at God for all of the things that the writers feel God is really unfair about. That isn't their faith being questioned. That isn't given to them as, don't be like Jeremiah, How dare he say these terrible things about God? Nope, nobody in there criticizes him for that. Because it isn't an assault on God for us to express our anger and our frustration and our sadness to God. God is so much bigger than that. We need to make space for that. I spent some time working as a chaplain in a facility for people. It had 6 floors. It was a, what's the best way to describe it? It's sort of a nursing home, but it's for people with various acute conditions. So most of them were younger, but traumatic brain injuries, degenerative diseases that hit early on, things like that. And there were several of us chaplaining, so they split us up between the floors. And I was at the end of the list for picking, so I got the floors that were left, which was fine. But one of the other chaplains came up to me and said, "Bless you for taking those floors, because there's a reason they didn't get picked first." I don't know how familiar people are with Huntington's. It's a degenerative disease of the brain. And I worked as a chaplain in the largest Huntington's unit in the country. So there were dozens of people living together on this unit, all in various stages. And early on, it's not extremely difficult to manage, but as it gets later, what it functionally does is it kind of eats away at your brain from the back forward. So you lose fine motor control and balance, and then you start having trouble speaking and swallowing. But the front of your brain, the part of your brain that you think in, that you hear yourself in, that you process the world through mostly, that remains intact until the end. So all of these people are just kind of watching themselves lose the ability to do things they've done their whole life. And some of them were really happy, upbeat people who understood what was going on, but made the most of it in their time together. They really enjoyed the opportunities afforded by being with a bunch of other people struggling with the same thing, so they could all experience these problems together and have help. And we did all kinds of fun things together. One woman was like, "Moving in here is one of the best things that happened to me, because I finally feel like I'm part of a community," which is both really amazing and really scary for other reasons, I feel like. But some people, the younger you are when symptoms hit, the faster it usually progresses. So we had a resident in her 20s who, within the span of 5 years, had gone from being on like a high school dance team to not being able to swallow properly. And the amount of anger and sadness that a lot of these people had was just tremendous. I don't blame them. But the trick, the struggle, the reason that so many people struggled to work with the residents on this floor is that so many people are uncomfortable with that anger and that sadness. Emotions are part of the human experience, not just the happy ones, not just the joyful, upbeat ones. Yes, it's great when we can make the most of our situations, but man, yell at God sometimes, please. It will make you feel better, and God's totally okay with it. And if you're not sure how, I can absolutely direct you to some people who do it in here. There's a good one that I feel like we quote every once in a while. Jesus on the cross screaming, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Which itself is a quote from the Psalms. 22. I know we love 23, right? Psalm 23. "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil." Well, the one before that is, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from hearing me?" It's all there. It is great to be positive, but it's toxic to be positive all the time. It isn't healthy. We are ignoring something, we are burying something if we don't acknowledge that sadness and anger and fear, sometimes at least. Lament does eventually make its way back to hope. And we talked about that a bit last week, right? Jeremiah is writing this as Jerusalem is destroyed, as the temple is torn down, and the city is burned, and everyone has lost everything, and everyone, a significant portion is being dragged away in chains to Babylon, and everything's terrible. And at the end, he's like, I get it, it's all bad, but someday it'll be different. It doesn't mean it's not bad now. But someday it'll be different. It'll be better. So yes, I will rejoice and I will hope and I will look for that day. But right now I'm going to scream. That is his response. And that is, if you read the Psalms of Lament, that's what pretty much all of them do. Horrible anger. Why have you forsaken me? What's wrong? What did I do? Why did you do this to me? I know it won't always feel like this, but right now it does. And sometime I'll get there. So, when you're feeling down, or angry, or like it's really unfair, because life is really unfair sometimes, to all of them, and Jared acknowledges that, things don't go the way they should. Be upset about it. Find people to share that with. Not as people who are upset, sure, with you, or people that can at least handle that anger and that sadness with you. Not try to make it go away, because it will. It'll fade. It'll work out. Something else will come next. But we don't get to jump to Easter without having the crucifixion. And we don't get to jump to the positive happy without going through the sad and angry. And this is a place where we can do it together. And this is a text where we can find words if we don't have them. That is the beauty of this resource. It gives everyone's take on everything. There is something to reference. And if you need help finding things, I can help you find them. But don't be afraid. It is not a threat to your faith to be sad or angry or lost. That is the story of every person who has lived and will live. It is a story that is contained in our scriptures, which give hope that those moments will pass and redemption comes from it afterwards. We are celebrating communion today. The Last Supper is something of a lament, is it not? The end of Jesus' life, his body being broken and his blood being spilled out. That accomplishes something for us? Yes. Was even Jesus happy about it at the moment? No, clearly not. But it's something that he went through, and it is something we go through, and it is something we remember and celebrate together, knowing the same kinds of things can and do and will happen in our lives. Amen.